Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're exploring how a totally accidental 19th century dog experiment actually holds the secret to understanding your modern consumer habits. Think about it. Why does hearing a simple four-note fast food jingle or just seeing a red soda logo instantly trigger this feeling of warmth, happiness, or even a sudden craving? Well, it's definitely not a coincidence. It's actually a foundational learning theory that operates entirely beneath the surface of your conscious mind. To answer that, let's dive into Section 1, Pavlov's accidental discovery. We literally have to travel all the way back to the 1890s to witness a breakthrough that changed psychology forever. Now, what's really wild about this is that Ivan Pavlov, he wasn't a psychologist at all. Nope, he was a brilliant Russian physiologist who was just trying to understand how the digestive system worked in dogs. He was focused purely on measuring gastric juices. But, his incredibly sharp observation skills led him to notice something super peculiar happening in his lab. He noticed his canine subjects were drooling long before actually getting fed. It was this automatic anticipatory reaction that he originally termed a psychic secretion. I mean, the dogs were salivating just by hearing the footsteps of the assistant bringing their meals. Our brains are completely wired to find patterns, and Pavlov realized these animals were drawing an automatic connection. Which brings us to Section 2. The man behind the dogs. Understanding Pavlov's really intense persona is absolutely key to getting how he actually proved this theory. This guy was incredibly regimented. He viewed even 3 minutes sitting in a barber's chair as a total waste of time. He was so intensely dedicated to his research that he once took his lecture fees and spent the whole shebang entirely on lab animals, rather than his own struggling family. It sounds harsh, but this meticulous, borderline obsessive nature is exactly what allowed him to design such rigorous experiments. If you look at his life, it's a remarkable journey, from a boy in Russia who suffered a really severe childhood fall, to surviving a political revolution, to actually becoming a Nobel laureate in 1904 for his work in physiology. His immense resilience translated directly into his science. By 1927, he had published his seminal book, Conditioned Reflexes, which officially cemented his legacy in behavioral science forever. And he didn't do it alone. Thanks to funding from a wealthy aristocrat, plus a steady flow of medical students eager to write their doctoral theses, he commanded a world-class laboratory. It was fully equipped to carry out highly controlled chronic experiments. Get this, the Soviet government even continued to fund him despite his public criticisms of communism, purely because his scientific contributions were just way too profound to ignore. All right, let's move on to Section 3, the rules of conditioning. Let's look at the exact experimental mechanics and how he proved these mental associations in a strictly controlled lab setting. Pavlov went to extreme lengths to protect his data. He isolated the dogs in this highly specialized soundproof setup, just so a random footfall from a passerby or, a slamming door wouldn't trigger a false reaction. The environment had to be absolutely pristine to prove that the specific stimulus he introduced was the single, solitary cause of the behavior. So here is the exact step-by-step process he mapped out. By intentionally and repeatedly pairing something totally neutral, like a ticking metronome, with meat powder, he created a real biological link. Research indicates it took roughly 20 of these pairings, but eventually he made the metronome alone trigger the salivation. That neutral stimulus, it was now a powerful trigger. We can break down the formal vocabulary that he invented right here, and these are terms we literally still use today to describe how an automatic physiological response gets reprogrammed. So the meat powder is the unconditioned stimulus, which produces the unconditioned response of natural drooling. Simple enough, right? Well, once paired, the metronome becomes the conditioned stimulus, generating the conditioned response, which is that learned salivation. It's like a giant puzzle clicking into place. Before we go any further, let's hit Section 4, classical versus operant conditioning. It's absolutely vital we avoid a super common source of confusion by separating Pavlov's classical conditioning from American psychologist B.F. Skinner's operant conditioning. Here's the difference in a nutshell. While Skinner's operant conditioning shapes active, voluntary choices through rewards and punishments that happen after an action, Pavlov's classical conditioning is entirely automatic, involuntary, and instinctual. It's a gut reaction. It occurs before any conscious decision is ever even made. Which brings us right to Section 5, the Little Albert experiment. let's shift our focus away from the salivary glands of dogs and look at the incredibly complex emotions of human beings. In a very famous and frankly ethically troubling 1920 study, researchers Watson and Rayner tested if an infant could be classically conditioned to experience fear. They paired a really loud, terrifying noise, striking a hammer against a steel anvil, with a completely harmless white rat. Just like Pavlov's metronome, the rat was initially totally neutral, but that loud noise caused an instinctual startle response. Eventually, just through repetition, this caused a 9-month-old infant to fear the rat entirely on its own. Now, what's really fascinating here is this phenomenon called stimulus generalization. The child's newly programmed fear instantly bled into everything fuzzy. It extended to a rabbit, a dog, a fur coat, and remarkably, even a Santa Claus mask. The brain had completely generalized that conditioned response to literally anything visually similar. Wild, right? Okay, moving on to Section 6, Shaping the Modern Mind. How exactly do these exact same involuntary rules govern our society today, for better and for worse? On the positive side, in therapy, figures like Joseph Wolf actually used these principles to slowly cure phobias by pairing terrifying objects with a state of deep relaxation. It's a process called reciprocal inhibition, basically meaning you simply cannot be anxious and relaxed at the exact same time. So the automatic response of fear is gradually overwritten by an automatic response of calm. Pretty brilliant. But on the commercial side, advertisers totally hijack this, using what's called the peripheral route of persuasion, meaning they don't use logic or facts to sell to you, they just use associations. They link your natural admiration for a famous athlete or the joy of an upbeat song directly to a pair of sneakers or a fast food meal. You don't even need to consciously process the advertisement's message. The repeated pairings of logos with positive feelings do all the heavy lifting completely automatically. The ultimate power of this theory is honestly staggering. Take the famous Pepsi challenge, for example. The positive emotional response conditioned by Coca-Cola's brand over decades literally overrode physical reality. When blindfolded, people actually preferred Pepsi. But when they could see the logos, the conditioned feelings of happiness, family, and fun attached to the Coke logo completely dominated their actual sensory experience of taste. No way, right? However, this kind of conditioning requires constant maintenance, or else it undergoes what we call extinction, which is just the gradual fading of that learned response. This is exactly why brands drop disgraced celebrities immediately. The moment a scandal breaks, that celebrity stops producing that positive, unconditioned response. If a company doesn't sever ties quickly, their brand's conditioned image will rapidly deteriorate, right alongside the celebrity's reputation. As we wrap up this explainer, consider how deeply your unconscious mind is targeted every single day by the peripheral route of persuasion. It raises a fascinating question about how we interact with media. Shouldn't we be explicitly told when these psychological tools are being used to shape our lives? It's definitely something to think about the next time you feel a sudden, unexplainable urge to buy something just from hearing a jingle. Keep questioning what's really driving your habits.